Hello, everybody. My name is Neamtu, and together with my colleague Paolo, we'll be discussing about a few experiences we've had with real-life deployments of CNC, some lessons learned, some best practices, things to look at if you plan to do this in your environment. So, just a bit of an agenda. We are going to have a quick CNC overview. Um, Discuss on what you should be looking at for planning the CNC deployment. As we'll stress this out throughout the session, the planning piece is the most important one that we are looking at. Um, Discuss some best practices. And then, since this is developer days, we wanted to have a dedicated slide maybe just to summarize what's the role of a developer within CNC. So we are touching multiple parts of the organization, networking, software development, operations. So it's important for some people to know where they can actually play within the CNC deployments. And then a few conclusions. So let's let's get started. See where this gets us. Okay. So we've seen already quite a few CNC sessions. I'm not gonna stress too much on the architecture and everything. Just to highlight the fact that the applications are running on a common infrastructure. We have optimization engine, active topology, change automation. Everything was covered already in quite a few sessions. These are working together with the SRPC that is responsible with the optimization in the network, data gateway that is collecting KPIs, and the NSO, which has the role of the write function, right, to provision the actual services. This is not. This fits into the telecom infra project view of the architecture, and CNC is actually the SDN controller alongside an optical controller that can be further integrated into the hierarchical controller, our Sedona product. Now, everything has to run on the actual hardware, right? And this slide is a bit busy. Just it's meant to show you what is under the hood, right? So this is all running on VMs, right? The CNC cluster has at least five VMs. We have the NSO, which is also running on at least two VMs. The CDG, two or more VMs, depending on the scalability. And the SRPC, which can be also hosted on a virtual machine, or it actually can be placed inside the network as a function of existing physical routers. All of these protocols are something that you'll have to work with in the actual deployments. So just to have a brief idea, what are the interactions between all of these components and what areas you have to look at. I think what's important to notice is that we have tried to standardize the touch points in the network. So for example, the NSO is the write function in the network, right? This is the only element that will push configuration to the network elements. In a similar way, we have the CDG as the read function. So we try to standardize the collection of all the KPIs to go to a single point, which is the CDG, that can further on publish them to an external bus or just towards the CNC applications. The SRPC is, of course, the element that has to do with optimizing the traffic engineering functions. Northbound, the CNC is exposing a common UI, right? And it's also acting as a proxy for all the northbound integration. Yes? It's a good question because it's a very important topic that we have to address throughout our project. So these VMs are mostly hosted on a virtual environment. So we can have the CNC VMs, the NSO, the CDG, also the SRPC co-located into the VMware, for example, data center, right? But these have to talk to the network, so you can have, wherever these domains interact one with each other, you can have a firewall that has to allow for communication. So that's why it's very important to have all of these protocols in mind and make sure you allow all of this communication to happen. So I don't think there's an exact point where you will see the firewall. You can have multiple firewalls, right? But typically you'd say between domains. Yeah. Functionality-wise, the CNC can provide a lot of features. And really the motivator for this session is how do I address the planning of all of these features, right? And our message will be prioritization, right? We want to extract what's really important for you in day zero, let's say, and focus only on those functionalities to start to get value from the platform. So don't get dragged into a lot of fancy, cool features that are interesting for you, but maybe are not important from day zero. As my colleague Paolo will talk about, there are complexities only just for allowing the platform in the network. So it's key to be able to define your minimum viable product out of these functionalities. So let's see what could be included as an MVP. We'll have some recommendation, but of course this is up to you to decide. Okay, so where does this all fit into my network? This product, as we've seen in our projects, spans across the IT department, across the network design, software developer, and of course the network operations. So the first conclusion is that you will have to talk to all of these stakeholders from all of these departments. Network operations, of course, for topology visualization, for deep inventory, service assurance, event dashboard. This platform can be used at a great value by the operations team. On the IT part, it's very often that the virtual environment which is used to host all these VMs is owned by a different team, for example, from the one that runs the network devices, right? So this is a separate discussion, separate interaction that you'll have to have with the IT department on virtual environment planning, security, on the firewall metrics, or on different integrations. On the network design, of course, we have all the path computation functions, protocols like BGPLS, PSAP. They will be handled by let's say, the traditional team that handles the networking. So the CNC will, of course, have to be integrated with the network elements that have to support such new protocols and functionalities. So you'll have to talk to this team quite a lot. But last but not least, on the software development part, because of course we use NSO for software provisioning, and very often this is a different part of the organization that handles this part, and they are not necessarily always working together. Okay, so for features like traditional NSO service provisioning, service health, function pack customization, CI/CD pipelines, and so on, you might find yourself discussing to completely different people that you have been discussing up to that point. So our first message is the fact that you have to see this deployment as a whole, spanning across at least these departments that are not always run by the same people. So you will have to close these gaps between different people to have a streamlined deployment. So having said that, let's look a little bit how we would plan a CNC deployment. And for that, I will hand it over to my colleague Paolo to discuss.
Okay, does it work? Yeah. Okay, so how do we plan a CNC deployment? So I'm going to expand a bit on what Dan just said. Just giving you a bit of an overview of the things that you need to consider when planning for a CNC deployment. You will see the platform has multiple touch points into your organization, into the network, and so you might have to consider things that are basically requirements by multiple stakeholders in your organization. So each stakeholder might have a different requirements in terms of platform integration into the network. So you will see this is not easy. However, we will give recommendations to you on how to approach it in the best possible way. The key message is this is not a standalone platform, basically. So it's something that will have to be integrated into existing processes and tools, existing OSS systems, security, fault management, platform performance management, and so on. So this is something to keep in mind very clearly. Maybe some of this concept might or might not be relevant to you, or might be less or more relevant to you depending on your organization, but still this is something that you want to be prepared to discuss at least. So the areas that such a deployment would touch are the ones that are described in this picture. We will first start with the organizational and project management impact that this deployment might have. Key messages here are you will have, it is highly recommended to have an end-to-end architect following this project on your side, who will work closely with the Cisco peer in order to prioritize the definition of the use cases, the how to integrate the platform into the network, and how to translate the business requirements from your organization into actual use cases that you will deploy on the platform. Another topic is the alignment to the network readiness. So your network will have to provide specific SDN features in order to be able to leverage the CNC deployment. So you have to make sure that software releases that you run in the network are already capable, or you need to plan for upgrades in order to have those SDN features into the network. Who owns the platform in your organization? From an engineering standpoint, from an operational standpoint, consider, as Dan said, these are multiple VMs. So you need to identify who is the owner for each component of the platform. The recommendation is to have the project to be phased. This is not something you want to deploy in one go. You cannot deploy all the use cases that the platform provides. And by the way, the use cases are basically coming out of the platform capabilities that Vishaka already described to you in her presentation. So you need to understand which are the immediate priority for you in terms of use cases. What do you want to deploy, and then build from there. But we will see later. Hardware procurement is another topic. So you might already have the infrastructure required to host all these applications, or you might not. So depending on your hardware supply times, you might decide to plan in advance in order to have the required hardware to run the platform. And then you need to decide who is going to do the customizations, specifically in terms of development. This is a framework where you can develop on. So you need to decide if you want to approach use case development internally with a dedicated team, for example, by leveraging partners, by leveraging Cisco. You need to decide. Another thing is the architectural impact. So use case definition is an important topic. You need to define what is important for your business. What is the business requirements that you want to implement into the network with the use cases that this platform can enable. You need to understand what are the differences between out-of-the-box use cases versus use cases that might require customization. So this is connected to the development discussion. Who is doing the development? Your high availability requirements. How many sites you will be deploying the platform on? Any external integrations that are required. As I said, this platform has multiple touch points into the network, so you need to be prepared to discuss with the security department, virtual infrastructure department, operations, and so on. Another impact area is on the network. You need, once you define your use cases, you need to define where those use cases will be relevant into the network. So not all the use cases are relevant for the whole of your network. For example, layer 2, layer 3 VPN services are only relevant for edge devices, not on the core, right? Traffic optimization use cases might be relevant for the core, but not for the edge. So these kind of things you need to be prepared to discuss, as well as the network element capabilities. So are those network elements where you will be deploying use cases ready to host those the implementation of those use cases? Another discussion you need to think about is the netconf versus CLI nets. So are you going to implement services by using netconf or by using CLI? The SRPCE design, where are you going to deploy your PCEP sessions into your network? Where are you going to deploy your BGPLS sessions into your network? How ready you are from a segment routing implementation perspective. So do you already have segment routing into the network? Are you planning for it? So this is relevant for the use cases you want to deploy on the platform. Last point is about security. You might have some regulations you have to comply with, maybe because of your of the country you are in. So you are implementing this platform into a production network. So you might have some security requirements from your regulatory, from your government. You need to define who needs to do what on the platform. So who are the people who needs to use this platform? Very likely you will not be having one person touching the whole network, but you have to identify subdomains. So a subset of people can only touch one part of the network. Other roles can touch another part of the network. Assign privileges, read them rights, and so on. Another security area is about security posture or assessment. You might be required to have a security assessment of the platform before putting it into production. So this is not to scare you, but it's just so that you are prepared for this kind of discussions, which again, probably in your organization, some of these points might be less relevant. The goal, however, is to target for a minimum viable product. So you don't have to boil the ocean. The key here, as Dan said, is prioritization. So we need to understand what's important for an initial deployment of the platform and then build from there. So how can you build an MVP, a minimum viable product? Some suggestions here. We cannot give a recipe, but we can give suggestions or recommendation. For example, in terms of use cases, the easiest one to implement is the topology discovery use case. So this is usually the first use case that is deployed on the platform. It is a read-only use case and provides immediate value because you can see the IGP topology, you can see what are the transport services running into the network, which path they take into the network, the physical path. You can have an inventory of the network devices with the deep inventory capability coming in 5.0. And this already on its own provides a lot of value. Then once you have started familiarizing with the platform, you can build more complex use cases. Another area is try to reduce the footprint if this is relevant to you. So considering we are only having a read-only use case, you might decide to do trade-offs in terms of HA. So for example, you might deploy the platform in only one site and only build on a second site when you will be doing actual writes to the network, for example. Or if you already have the virtual infrastructure resources already available, then you can go with full HA, no problem. Another area which can be thought about reduced footprint is not to onboard the whole network, because very likely it will not be ready in terms of SDN features, as we said before, but you can start by onboarding just a subset of the network. This, of course, has positive implications in the sizing of the platform. The less devices you onboard, the less footprint it is required in the virtual infrastructure. And then, of course, minimize the external integrations, only limiting yourself for an MVP to just the ones that are strictly required by your regulations or by your internal organizational requirements. In terms of the network, again, you need to assess the network capabilities because they need to provide, you need to leverage on those capabilities to actually deploy the platform, right? Another suggestion is about the CLI versus netconf discussion. If you don't have any netconf experience yet, then you can postpone using netconf to a later stage and then stick to what you already know, which is CLI. So again, the goal is not to boil the ocean, but start deploying the platform with immediate value. But this, just a warning, this does require some preparation anyway. So in order to leverage the platform capabilities, also for this very simple use case, that is topology discovery, you still need to enable BGPLS into the network. You still need to enable PSEP. If you want, you need to enable latency measurements into the network. So those are all features that are a prerequisite for even for the first use case, and you will need to test and validate it if you don't have already them running into the network. So it is very important that you work very closely together with the network engineering department because you will have to validate features that will actually go into the network. Any questions? It is also it is also required to collect transport services from information from the network devices. So by using PSEP, the network device can tell the SRPC which RSVPT tunnels or segment routing policies are started from that device. So you will visualize them on the topology. Best practices. Of course, you need to prepare the virtual infrastructure in order to be able to host the platform. You need to prepare the network, so you need to identify, like we said, the network elements that you will be implementing use cases on. You need to make sure they have the correct software release running. If possible, minimize as much as possible the software versions running into the network. Firewalling is another thing. This platform needs to talk to the network, needs to talk to SS systems, needs to talk to northbound systems. So this is all something you need to consider from a pure networking perspective. Topology collection, one recommendation would be to deploy hierarchical route reflectors for BGPLS sessions to reduce the number of peerings, BGP peerings on the SRPCE. In terms of PSEP, you can deploy organically, basically only when required. You don't need PSEP in the whole network, very likely. So, but you will only need it on specific points of the network where you have hotspots. So you might start the PSEP implementation in phases. CDG design, this is basically a variable part of the platform footprint. The number of VMs or CDG VMs will depend on the number of network devices you onboard on the platform, the number of KPIs that are calculated and metrics collected from the network elements, the cadence, and so on. So this is something you need to address as well. But again, once everything is in place, you can get value. So familiarize with the first use case. Make sure that all the transport services that you run today into the network follow the path that you expect. Make sure that latency readings from the network are accurate and they are not wrong. So make sure to take the time to check the topology is what you expect it to be, and the services, the transport services that run on top of the topologies are the one that you expect them to be, and so on, before moving to provisioning use cases or traffic optimization use cases later on. So the message is prioritization again. Focus on what's important first. Remove the nice to haves to a later stage. So I don't know, maybe you don't need performance management of the platform in the initial stage. Just saying. I mean, this really depends on the organizational requirements. And possibly only look forward. This means only focus on new features like segment routing. If you don't have a need to lifecycle manage the RSVPT tunnels, then this is something that you can handle later. Focus on on what's really important for you at this stage. Last slide for me is what happens beyond the MVP. So you need to have a plan for the use cases that you want to implement on the platform. By the way, in this deck you will find some reference slides. One of these reference slides is a template to define what a use case looks like, what is the business requirement for that use case, what network element it touches, and so on. So you can use that as a template to define your pipeline and the importance of and the priority of those use cases. Other reference slides you will find are about the points that I've touched about the key things to understand. You will find an expanded list of those points that I've discussed with some comments as well. Ideally, your team structure should be based on use cases. You need to plan for software development pipelines because the platform allows some development activities. So you need to plan for different environments if you do so. So you need to have an environment for development, an environment for lab testing, an environment for pre-production, and so on. Release management. How do you want to manage the release cadence of CNC? We have, I think, 2 releases per year, something like that. So you need to plan in advance if you want to upgrade to every release or you want to skip some, and that's it. And again, the message here is align with the network engineering department, making sure that all the features that you need for the CNC deployment are aligned to their testing activities. So make sure that they test, for example, PSEP or latency measurements, as well as the typical validation activities that they do as an engineering department. My part is finished. Any other question? No, it depends on the readiness of the devices. You cannot onboard, I don't know, 20,000 devices if only 500 of them have the features that you need, right? So this has an impact on the sizing of the platform. So it depends if you already have resources available. So say that you have infinite virtual infrastructure resources, then you can very well deploy the full platform footprint with your target to onboard the whole network over time, right? But you don't have to. Depending on your hardware procurement times, depending on the available resources that you have, you can plan it in steps. It really depends. It's coming.
It's actually the next slide, and you've seen this probably since you asked. No. Yeah, it's a very valid question, and we've received this question so many times from our peers or from the customers that we said, okay, let's have a summary slide into this. We've had a dedicated session yesterday just on what needs to happen to onboard an existing NSO into CNC, okay? So yeah, this is possible, and this is kind of what you have to look for if you want to do that. First of all, the assessment of your services. They need to have a service plan. So if you have legacy services in the network without a service plan, there are ways to enhance this. This was described in detail yesterday. So look for that reference session. The key message is that you don't have to modify the services themselves. You can bring the service plan alongside them and recompile. So it's quite not so disruptive. Of course, the CNC has requirements for what software version the NSO has to run, so that has to be upgraded if necessary, right, to match those. There are certain function packs that have to be installed to work with CNC, but these are all incremental upgrades, so they shouldn't impact what the NSO is already running, right? So we haven't identified, let's say, things that you have to modify and disrupt the existing deployment. NEDs have to be assessed. CNC comes with compatibility metrics, let's say. So certain features have been tested against certain Cisco iOS XR releases with their own NEDs. So if you want to make use of those out-of-the-box capabilities, you have to make sure that your NEDs are matching those. Otherwise, or for non-Cisco devices, development is required on that. The CNC cut integration. So you want to see your NSO services in CNC and start to manage those from CNC. For that, there is this cut integration that has to be done. Again, very in-depth discussed in yesterday's session, so I will not insist on that. And of course, the multi-vendor support, function pack development is required for either Cisco devices outside of the compatibility metrics or for non-Cisco devices. This is just a small summary of how you would approach CNC with existing NSOs, sorry, which could be quite a common setup. Yeah. Yes, I would say so. Cut integration is yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now, since this is developer days, what is the role of a developer on CNC? Because it's clear the role of network engineer, right? CNC can be used heavily for traffic engineering optimization. You can put certain objectives. The path calculation capabilities are enhanced by CNC, right? But what about what the role can a developer play here? And we try to summarize these into 4 different areas. First two is the traditional NSO services, which is nothing new that the CNC brings into these requirements. You keep developing the NSO services, or stuff like service reconciliation in case this is not a greenfield. So if you have already services that you have to onboard on NSO, you have to do this exercise of service reconciliation. But again, this is standard NSO activities. Where CNC comes into play, there are certain customizations, let's say, that has to be done on different use cases that are listed here. So service health, which has just been discussed this morning, requires heuristic package customization, let's say. We have the health insight KPIs or change automation, which require you to be familiar with a sensor path or with with sensors that you define as KPIs. And if you use change automation, then you will enter again into the NSO space to define possible actions that are triggered as a result of that KPI generating an alarm, right? For CDG, you can enhance the custom collections with a particular SNMP object IDs that you might want to look for, or other, again, sensor paths. So knowledge into this kind of SNMP or sensors is required for that type of activity. Function packs and overlays, again discussed. It's a must, right? So function packs enhancement to support for non-Cisco devices. To integrate a cut visualization, this also requires a specific set of skills which are closer to what an NSO developer is used for. And last but not least, custom adapters. We've seen in our project the need to compensate maybe for lack of features on certain network devices. One example, we had to build a custom PSAP adapter for a particular device that didn't support this. So this was done via NSO, right? Or another example is the link delay advertisement into IGP. Again, it's quite open, right? So it's open for creativity. We can compensate up to a certain level, lacking of these features. These are examples, right? It's not something that we have published at open source or something, but yeah. I think this was done by some colleagues. I think the problem was not necessarily the link measurement, but rather the advertisement into IGP. So the device was probably not compliant with I don't remember exactly the particular RFC that allows this functionality, and
I can answer that if you
yeah,
want. So basically, the problem was that this particular vendor was not advertising the link latency into the IGP. So this information would not be picked by the SRPCE, and in turn, you would not be able to visualize it on the GUI, right? As an attribute of the link. So in our case, we basically collected the measurement using MIBs on the network device, and then using the SRPC APIs to augment the information about that link.
yeah, sure. So just as conclusions to what we have discussed, the functionalities that the CNC presents are very attractive, right? And you might be drawn into wanting to see them all from day one, right? But priority planning and prioritization are key here, because um, there are a lot of challenges that might come up which are not necessarily technical. They can be organizational challenges. You have to speak with different teams. They have to speak within themselves. And it might take longer time to get to production, to get the platform installed, to see it running, and then to have all these nice feature running. So prioritize, define an MVP that makes sense for you, and be proactive. There's no need to wait for CNC to be in production or to be in the lab to start testing PSAP or to start testing BGPLS on the network devices that will be subject to integration. And maybe these features haven't been brought into discussion up to this point because there was no need for that. So you might have to go to your network team in time and ask them to test these features, because it's a prerequisite and we cannot do without those. And they typically introduce delays, and it's quite a pity to have them in the critical path. Connect different stakeholders. I think this is really important. It's the platform touches on so many different areas that were not necessarily connected before. Network engineers with software developers, with the IT department that manages the virtual environment. The tendency is to keep things in their own silos and to say that the other team is responsible for doing that. We need somebody to bridge all these gaps and to bring everybody together and to look at this from the whole plan. So yeah, this is kind of the session we've had. We have quite a few reference slides. If you want to see the deck, we go more in depth, but it's just for your future references. So I'll stop here. If you have any questions, just to yes. For the environments, we recommend at least 2 environments, production and pre-production. This is it's a clear recommendation that we do. That's a minimum, but it could be much more than that. For teaching the customer, actually, we have a project where there is a dedicated team in the customer that picks up the NSO development or maybe some custom smaller services. We enable them to do it instead of relying on us. So I think that's clearly a valid trend, and we are already doing it right now.
Yeah, it happened in the past that we teach them how to do, and then they do it themselves. So it takes time, but
I think
it's possible.
I think the challenge is rather to find at the customer side the team that should pick that up, right? We have a smaller project where we simply discuss with the network team, and they haven't seen NSO before, right? So are they the right people to be doing NSO development, or they have to start thinking about building such a team? Because their development will not end with one layer 2 and one layer 3 service model, and that's the end. We go out and hand it over, and it has to start being a agile environment. So that's clearly a learning experience for them as well. So it depends on at what stage the customer is. But for many, we already start to see the creation of these dedicated teams. And if that happens, it's much easier to offload these development efforts to them. So.
Well, from experience, we see that initially the service providers tend to reuse the same network engineers also for NSO development, which is not optimal, let's say, right? The ideal scenario, in my opinion, would be like the one that we have seen this morning with Telefonica. They have a dedicated team just doing developments, taking requirements from the network engineering and so on. But this doesn't usually happen. It depends on also the size of the customer and so on. If they can afford the dedicated team.
I think this is not a CNC
No,
topic. It's an NSO, right? So customers who've had NSO already, it's much easier for them to pick this up. So yeah. Um,
You mean adding on top of the CNC platform?
I th- yeah. Yeah, I think we've actually seen a request just similar to this, but from a service assurance perspective. Like no segment routing plans yet, but a big need for service assurance. So for service health functionality for the health insight KPIs. So seeing this as as an assurance tool. So, but I think that's just the first entry. Like the MVP can be different, right? Um, yeah. All right. Any questions? You know how to find us. So.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
For non-production.
It depends on the integration requirements. We spend a lot of time in a particular project just testing, integrating with TACACH, integrating with fault management, with security systems, because those will be required in production. So from that perspective, I don't think the AWS will answer it. If the need is to see the functionalities to do service development, then clearly it's an answer to that. So I think it just depends on what are the requirements. Maybe it can be a third environment, right? Like a development environment could be addressed in AWS for sure.